We're here with John Lewis Jr. and for the Trailblazers program, Carroll County Trailblazers. And John, I've learned recently that you were born right here in Carroll County. You want to start there?
Yeah, I was born in Sykesville, Maryland.
Wow.
November the 10th of 1935. That tells you how young I am.
That's all right. I won't do the math.
No, not right now. The world's watching. But anyway, we lived on Gaither Road. As a matter of fact, we lived about 5 minutes from the Fairhaven, what's Fairhaven Nursery Home, which back then was Fairhaven Farm. And my father worked on the farm. So I was born in the little house over there on Gaither Road not too long ago.
So you went to school here in Carroll County, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went to school in Johnsville. It was then a little two-room building, and it had first, second, third grade on one side, and it had fourth, fifth, and sixth on the other side. And for the seventh grade, we were bused 14 miles from there to Robert Moton School here in Westminster. And so I finished high school there. Well, I didn't finish high school. I went to the 10th grade, and I quit and went to work. After working for a while, then I went back to school, got my GED, attended Morgan University for a little while. And after Morgan University, I became a licensed practical nurse. After that, I became a civil engineering technician and a soil and water conservationist. After that, I went into the trucking business, and I stayed there until I retired, about two and a half years ago.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really interesting career.
Varied, to say the least.
So when you were in school in Carroll County, the schools were still segregated?
Pretty much, very much so. Very much so. Yeah, we had to live with the fact that we were riding a bus from Johnsville, 14 miles to Westminster, mm-hmm. And along the way we were not that far from high school, which was Sykesville High School, mm-hmm. at the time. But of course we weren't allowed to go there, so we went to Robert Moton here in Westminster.
You've done a lot of what might be called activist work. Mm-hmm. You've been involved with a lot of things, a lot of organizations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, a lot of organizations, that's true. There's a few people around who would call them by another name, but we'll stick with a lot of organizations. You know, the very first, in putting together my footnotes, the very first, I went back and I was thinking, what was the very first organization I ever belonged to? A formal organization, nationally recognized, and it was the Boy Scouts of America. And I was 11 years old, 10 and turned 11. And William Hudson, Sr., started a Boy Scout troop. William Hudson, Sr. was the Scoutmaster. Mr. Clarence Green was the Assistant Scoutmaster. And I, for the first time in my life, was made the leader of a group of people. And I became the troop leader of Troop 504. And went all the way up the ladder. I enjoyed the organization, and being a poor boy coming from a non-rich background, by no means, I found a comfort in belonging to the organization. We did a lot of things. What was most interesting to me was the travel, because up to that point, I really never got around very much. I got to my grandmother's house in Baltimore, which was my mother's mother, and I have to say that I really didn't care for that too much because I was pretty good with my hands. And every time I went down there, they sort of had a list of stuff that they wanted me to do. I got to admit, though, they were very good. They would always pat me on the back first and tell me how good it was. Then they'd give me the list they had for me to repair all these things. So I didn't really enjoy that too much. But I did enjoy the Boy Scouts because I then began to get around and to see other parts of the world, to meet other people. And believe it or not, when we went on the camping trips and we got up into the woods on these camping jamborees, it was no discrimination. Oddly enough, at the campsite, we were one. We did things as a unit. And it didn't matter if you were standing next to a Jewish boy, a white boy, a Hispanic kid. It didn't really matter. And it was almost to me as if we were in a different world. And I believe it was then that I began to notice this terrible thing called discrimination. Because when we came out of the woods, we came back into the realm of reality. But there in the woods, it was as if we were all one. And I found that later on, I look forward to these jamborees when we could go in the woods and as a unit, just simply have a good time. And we learned, they taught us that you were your brother's keeper. You were really your brother's keeper because the way the program was set up, you depended on that guy, and that guy depended on you. If you didn't have each other's backs, you weren't going to survive. And it was really us at that point against the wild, and which I also enjoyed. Well, not all of it. I'm not really fond of snakes. So, but that was the Boy Scouts. That was pretty much the first formal organization that I belonged to. And then as life went on, I did quit school in the 10th grade, but I went on to, we had a pastor at Union Street United Methodist Church who talked me into going back and getting my GED. And I used my life's experience and work experience up to that point to get my GED, which I did. And then he also encouraged me to enroll at nights at Morgan State University. And I didn't finish, but I did enjoy the time that I was there. It was then that I began to explore a lot of the reasons for discrimination. And that just led me from one organization to the next. Now, if you want me to, I can keep going on.
I know you can. I know from accompanying you and some other members of the NAACP last summer down to Washington for the 50th commemoration march of the March on Washington, that you were part of the original march.
Yes, I was.
Can you talk about what that experience was like?
Sort of like nothing that I had ever imagined before. It's, nothing that I really thought until it happened. I never thought such a thing was even possible. And even if you watch television and listen to, like my uncles who had been in the service and come back and talk about different things in different countries and people, it's a little bit of a different story. No, it's not. It's a real different story. It's really a big difference when you become involved in it yourself. And the March on Washington, which I thought when we got the idea to go, and at first I'm thinking, no, I don't think I want to go over there because of things that you hear on the news and you read in the papers, and you hear older folks talking about things that are going on in our world or our society, the hatred, the police brutality, the dogs being sicked on people, the bombings of churches and schools and people's homes. And my first thought was, if they're saying it's going to be a large crowd of people, and if we get there and somebody decides that they should set off a bomb or shoot, then there's going to be chaos. And in my mind, I'm thinking, if it's that many people in the panic, they will only have to fire one shot and people will kill themselves in the mad rush to just get out of the way. And my family really didn't want me to go. But I had defied them before when it came to racial matters, so I figured one more time wouldn't hurt. So I decided I would go. So several of us got together, and I was one of the few African Americans from Carroll County. And to this date, I only know of one other African American. Let's see, I think Sidney Shepherd too. I believe Sidney Shepherd. And Sally Dotson at the time, and she's now Sally Green. And I didn't know until the second march that they had actually gone. But I was one of the few that actually attended the march. And the march turned out to be, like I said, something out of a fairy tale. To see that many people, that mass of people coming together for one cause. People from, as we talked to them, from all over the United States and out of the United States, outside of the United States. And I just had to take a moment to realize that I stand here and I'm a part of this. And as we pushed our way through the crowd down to the pool and to the platform at the end of the pool where the activities were really supposed to take place, I had a fear, and I'm thinking, what's going to happen if something does go wrong? What's your best way out of here? How do you defend yourself, And I sort of just fell back on my prayer, and I thought, well, Lord, there's nothing I can do at this point. It's in your hands. And I took comfort in that fact. And to tell you the truth, I enjoyed the rest of the day. It was so inspiring that it made you feel like a different person. It made you feel like you were not alone. It made you feel like the rest of the world, as African Americans, the rest of the world, or somebody else in this world, all over this world, has our back. Somebody agrees with us. Somebody thinks that this should not be. Somebody thinks that this should end. And you take great comfort in that. And when the march was over, but prior to it being over, the culminating factor, the uplifting point, was when Dr. King took the podium and he began to speak. Trust me when I tell you, this man speaking, when he uttered his first words, I have a dream. That's just what it felt like. You were in a dream. It felt unreal. He was mesmerizing. Charismatic? Of course he was. And at that point, out of these thousands and thousands of people, if someone had dropped a pin, it would have sounded like thunder. And at the culmination of that speech, you felt like the gas tank of a car that was running on empty, trying to make it through, but all of a sudden, somebody pulled into that station and filled you up, not with regular, not with medium, but filled you up with high octane, and you were ready to run the race. And when I left there, I started to run the race. And of course, the story goes, I'm still running the race. The second march on Washington was equally effective, because I think those of us who went on the first march, we needed to be refueled again. It was time to have somebody recharge your batteries, put you out there, give you a push and say, keep going. And that's where we are today.
So fill in some of the things that happened in those years. What stands out in your mind? You said you got recharged and you were ready to go after that first march.
Well, prior to that, we were going around the county trying to get various restaurants integrated, and we were turned away from most, trying to integrate the one pool that we had in Westminster. And at that time, we were refused there also. Trying to get certain people to hire African Americans in certain jobs, and there was always some excuse. Well, you know, I would hire this person, being African American, but if I do that, then the rest of my employees who happen to be white are going to quit. And of course, when it came to restaurants and hotels and things like that, excuse me, the story was, well, you know, if I let you people come in, I really want you to come in, but if I let you come in, then my other patrons won't come. My story always was, look, people have to work to eat. So, you know, if they say that if you hire me, that white people are not going to come in, that's only going to last for a little while, because eventually if you hire enough African Americans, then enough white people are going to be without jobs, and they'll be then like we are. They got to work someplace in order to eat. And the same way with restaurants and things of public accommodations. They've got to sleep, eat somewhere when they travel. People like to come out and eat, and so do we. And as I put it to one restaurant owner, you know, at that point I had traveled around a little bit with my brother-in-law who owned trucks. And I had a front row seat to what it felt like being turned away, or going to the back window, to the back door. The sign said colored around back. And if you made a mistake and went to the wrong window, you were chastised. There was really nothing you could do about it, because if you gave the owner a bunch of lip as to why he should let you, he immediately called the police. Well, we knew then that calling the police wasn't ready. You might as well do nothing as to call the police, because as soon as he got there, they were going to ask no questions. Simply by the presence of you being black, you automatically going to be arrested, and you automatically going to jail with no rhyme or no reason. And you saw this happen a number of times over and over again. So back, it takes me to the fact that we were up into about the 60s. And during that period of time, we tried to get the Carroll Theater and some restaurants downtown again to serve one of our first demonstrations that I know of held in the county. It was led by Clarence Dorm and myself. And we had about 10 or 15 people, and we did picket the Carroll Theater. We were then later supported by the Colts, Baltimore Colts, who were then practicing at what was known then as Western Maryland College. And they too threatened to boycott the county unless some changes started. So this helped in starting to make some changes. I did a lot of things on my own without the backing of an organization, either because I'm hard-headed or because I truly believe in what I'm doing, or I'm stupid. But either way, it worked. And I just simply started going to restaurants and things and just simply sitting down and talking to people and saying, hey, you know, give it a try. Some people did, and some didn't. The one thing that stands out in my mind was the swimming pool in Westminster, which was Frock's swimming pool.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And I'm not an alcoholic drinker. And I think one time in my whole life, I was about 18 or 19, and I got drunk and I got sick. And I thank God for that, because that turned me off against alcohol. And but I went down to see Gene Frock, and we sat down and we started talking. And he said, "If you're going to talk to me, John, come on, have a beer." And it was a Budweiser. Well, now one beer to me was no different from any other beer. And so I sat there, and he and I drank a couple of Budweisers, and we talked. But when I left, we had integrated the pool. And we did. And of course, a friend of mine, Bernard, likes to say when we integrate the pool, then he closed it. Well, no, he actually told me when we integrated that he had thoughts about getting out of the pool business. Also in the making, and on the planning table was the big pool in Tawnytown. And after integrating his pool, and I did some investigation, and I was assured that the one in Tawnytown was going to be integrated. Now, by that time, we are into my cousin George Collins was out on the scene. We joined on the scene. He had been out there, and we formed a group known as the Concerned Black Citizens of Carroll County. He was the president. I became the vice president, and we started to really doing some serious business around the county. We were trying to garnish up support and getting people to support the public accommodations law, and which at that time I think was on the table. So we decided that we would send a group of people to Annapolis to speak on behalf of the law. And a few of us went down, and if I say stop remembering names, I won't remember everybody, and somebody will say to me, "Well, you forgot me." So I'm not going to name any names. We went down to Annapolis before the full General Assembly, rather. And right there we sat and we wrote a speech that because I'm trying to remember whether it was Wint, Smeltzer, which one was in office then, and I can't. But anyway, they told us, "Well, you will have time to talk." And we had to think, but he said, "Well, did you prepare a speech?" And we're like, "Yeah, we have a speech," or we didn't have one, but by the time we got up there to speak, we had one. We went out in the hall and we sat down and we wrote a speech. And somehow or another, something said, "You're going to have to give this speech." And I'm saying to myself, I don't think so. No, I'm not getting up before this crowd. And I really don't have a kindness for politicians anyway, even to this day. So we did the speech, and then they just said, "Well, who's going to give it?" You ever hear that song called "The Eyes of Texas Are Upon You"?
Yes.
Well, the eyes of the group were upon me, and I turned around and looked and went, "Who, me?" And they said, "Yes, you. And you're the only African-American in this group, and an African-American has to deliver this speech." And I thought, "Oh, Lord, here we go." And I think it was at that point my heart started to really pounding. My knees started to knocking to the point where they were getting sore. And I thought, well, here we go again. Lord, give me strength. So we went out and we registered our group. And lo and behold, they called on us. And I went up there to speak. They said, when you get up there, because I had never done any public speaking before, they said, when you get up there, if you feel a little bit nervous and jumpy, stop, look out over the crowd, look like you're really examining the crowd, and take a deep breath and get yourself comfortable. Now, when you get comfortable with looking at the crowd, then go into your speech. Do not spend all of your time looking down at your speech. Look down, look up. Give most of your attention to the crowd. And I thought, oh boy, this is going to be rich. But you know, the strangest thing happened. And that was kind of the first time it happened to me. Because I think at that point we really hadn't, no, we hadn't gotten to the march. Yeah, we had gotten to the March on Washington. So it was really the second time that feeling like I needed to not just refuel me, but I had a chance to stand before the entire General Assembly and let them know what I think, what I thought. And I'm thinking, well, they're either going to leave here with a full tank or they're going to leave here with a confused head. So I started off reading the speech. And shortly after, it was Phyllis Scott said to me, let me back up a minute. She said, if you get lost from the speech, John, she said, start talking from your heart. She said, you know the story. Nobody has to teach you. And she said, you start talking from the heart. Well, after the first line of the speech, I started talking from the heart. And I used to tell my other children, especially when I taught Sunday school back in the day, you know, the best story to tell is the story you know. And I thought to myself, I need to follow that advice. I don't know this speech, but I do know the story of discrimination. I do know about inequality. I know all of these things. So I simply told the story. And I told it what they said was with compassion and feeling. And as I talked, I could feel this whole General Assembly. Once again, if someone had dropped a pin in that room, once again, it would have sounded like thunder. For the first time in my life, I realized I had the power to put this many people in my control. And I let them have both barrels. And when I finished, I'm not bragging, I'm just simply stating the facts. And when I finished, they clapped. And I'm thinking, was I that good? Well, I guess I must have been. But along with the concerned citizens of Carroll County, I was also did a TV series, Channel 2. Yeah, we were on every Saturday morning for half an hour. And we talked about integration in the county. The name of the series, and I don't have the date, but I'm sure it's somewhere in Channel 2's archives, was called Conversations in Black and White. And every Saturday morning there was a panel of us that went on, I forget, 4, 5, 6 weeks, and we discussed racial problems. And you simply, you know, the topic came up and you discussed it. And that was an experience. Later went on with the concerned citizens. They passed the public accommodations law. I'm jumping around here, but they passed the public accommodations law. Now, we didn't know how many restaurants or places in the county were going to comply. So we secretly came up with a group of people, and I decided that we would do a test of every restaurant in the county. And we did. We told nobody, the press, or no one. And we gathered one Saturday morning, and it was about 25 or 30 of us. We paired people up. Would either be 2 Negroes and a white person, or 2 white people and a Negro, however we had the people to do. And we went out in a team of no less than 3 people. And I cordoned it off into sections and gave so many people a different section of the county. And I took what I felt would be, and which turned out was true, I took the hardcore places. Because I'm thinking, okay, I sort of have a little more experience than these people do. And a lot of them had a lot of questions. They were scared to death. You know, what happens if they call the police? And so prior to the actual demonstration test, we had to train people, you know, what to do if the police is called. Don't argue with people. If they say they're not going to serve you, thank them very kindly and leave. The first thing you want to do is be well dressed, be well mannered, be well spoken. If they act ignorant, you act the opposite. When they say get out, again, say thank you, and you leave. And we did. We tested every restaurant in the county. We had 3 restaurants at that time refused service. And I had those 3. One in New Windsor, Union Bridge, and one in Mount Airy. And that was interesting because people, and especially, and I'm going to say politicians, now somebody's going to be mad with me when they hear this, but I really don't care, tend to crop up a story or make up a story that's going to act in their favor. And it is to say, if you do this, the public is going to be mad about that. If you do this, the public isn't going to like it, and so forth. But what was interesting out of the whole thing, every place that everybody went, they were received with open arms. Oh, and by the way, there was one restaurant in the county who, prior to the public accommodations law being passed, we used to go there back in the 50s with our girlfriends. No, I'm seriously, over in Manchester. And, I guess I can say it now, they're no longer in business, it was Ostlers. And we used to be on our way to Hanover, and you probably don't remember Hanover Park. It was an amusement park, like Hershey Park in Hanover. And we used to take our girlfriends, and we would go to Ostlers, get a milkshake or ice cream cone, and we could sit down in Ostlers and eat. They were very nice people. But back to the other story, we found that when we tested the restaurants, the white person would go in prior to me coming in, buy a cup of coffee or something and just sit around. Well, then I walked in. And I walked in, and because I'm well clad, you know. I don't look like a street bum. And I'm carrying my briefcase. I look like I'm really on business. And when I walked in, and I'd go up to the counter and sit down, or the booth, whichever was available. And I noticed behind the counter, immediately you could tell who didn't really want to serve you. So you kind of got yourself set up for it because you were warned. They would start shuffling. They would start whispering, you know. And then finally, in all 3 cases, well, no, one at Mount Airy, but in the other 2, they would send the waitress over. And she would say, "Can I help you?" And I'd like a cup of coffee. And she would start stuttering. And then she would say, "Sir, I can't serve you." And I'm like, "Well, excuse me, but why not?" And I would say, "Well, I have money." And she'd say, "Well, I'm just not allowed to serve you." Well, the trick was to make them say why they couldn't serve you. And then I would say in a dignified manner, no sign of hostility, and I'd say, "Well, miss, but, you know, I just want a cup of coffee. I'm traveling through, and I want a cup of coffee. Can I please have a cup of coffee?" Well, you could see then that you were drawing, you were working on her feelings, and she was starting to really feel sorry for you. Well, she would turn around and look over behind the counter where I'm assuming the person back there was the manager from, I guess, for some sort of support. And they would just look at her and sort of left her on her own. And then she would finally say, well, in a quiet voice, "Well, sir, I can't serve black people in here." And in New Windsor, I said, "I'm African American." And she said, "Well, you know what I mean." And "No, I don't know what you mean." Well, she said, "Sir, we don't serve Negroes in here." And I said, "Oh, Okay, I said, well, you know what? What? I said, really, I'm sorry to bother you. I said, please accept my apology. Well, by this time, I had her name, and I already knew the name of the restaurant, and that's what I needed. So when I left, I would come out, get in the car, going down the road, but I would wait for my white counterpart to come. And then we would assess the aftermath. And in all three cases, the people that were in the restaurant immediately jumped on the owner and said, why didn't you serve the man a cup of coffee? We don't serve niggers in here. In one case, somebody said, the man didn't ask you for a nigger, he asked you for a cup of coffee. And why, you could at least give the man a cup of coffee. Well, look at him and said, in the bridge they said, look at him. He was dressed better than anybody in here. And you didn't want to serve him a cup of coffee? And it was really the afterthought. It was really the attitude of the people after it went down that made it for a good story. Well, I filed suit against those three restaurants and won the suit. And up to my knowledge, it was probably the first discriminatory suits filed in the county. I then went to work for the Soil Conservation Service. I was the first African American to work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture Soil Conservation Service. And there I was hired as a technician, surveying technician. I rose to a civil engineering technician and a soil and water conservation technician. And we were responsible for all the counties in the state of Maryland west of the Chesapeake Bay. We were assigned to Pipe Creek, a project on Pipe Creek. And we had a bunch of dignitaries come up from the home office in College Park. And we went to the restaurant in Kemar. And we went in there and we sat down. And we were told, and this is well after the public accommodation law was passed, that they wouldn't serve us. They refused to serve us. We left, came back in the main office in Washington called me. And they said they were going to send up another team, and they wanted me to take them back to the restaurant because they wanted them to refuse us again, which I did, and they refused us. And at this time, it was U.S. Department of Agriculture on my behalf that filed a suit. Well, the father said he would die and go to hell. From what I understand, this is what I was told, before he would serve us. The son took over the restaurant, and he served, but they had to pay, in this case, a fine. The first cases where we filed a suit, we were not after. It wasn't about money. Well, neither one of them, neither was the fourth one. But the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Home Office said, yeah, I said, throw some money in. Make them pay for it. So we did. But the first three, no, I didn't get any money out because the aim was to just simply get them to agree to comply with the law and serve whoever should come through the doors. Well, they agreed, and they did. But the one in Kemar, the father fought it, and they got right down to the fact that they were going to actually take him to court and sue for X amount of dollars. He backed out and turned it over to the son. The son agreed to pay the money, and he agreed to serve people, which he did after that. Now, prior to that, I was also, I quit one job and was looking for another one, and I got hired at Rosewood State Hospital. And there, as far as I know, and this is what I was told by a number of people, was probably the first African American male to become a professional nurse. And that's what I did there. And there I received, also at the Soil Conservation Service, a number of, I guess you would say, accolades, awards for, I think at one time I worked 3 or 4 years straight with, and didn't miss one day of work. And things like this. All kinds of records for outstanding performance. And because I usually like to, I usually enjoy what I'm doing, and I like to do different things. I'll do something for a little while, but then let me change and then do something different. And but I usually enjoy what I'm doing because we used to sit when we were youngsters and listen to older people talk. And back in those days, there wasn't much else to do when the sun would go down in the summertime and your parents would come out and say, get in the house because the Klan's going to ride tonight and all of this. And of course, as far as we were concerned, 7, 8, 9 years old, we wanted to stay out and play hide and go seek and this kind of things. And we hadn't never seen the Klan except for what was in the paper. And we could care less who was going to come riding. But anyway, we would stay out there and play, and we just got to really enjoy life. But now all of a sudden somebody's going to say to you, you can't do this because of this. And when you started to question people as to why you couldn't do something, reluctantly, even African-American adults were reluctant to say, you can't do that because you're not white. Black people aren't allowed to do that. And unfortunately, they work very hard at trying to put that in your head, that you can't do this because you're not the right color. And it really set you to thinking. But an old man said to me, your situation that you're put into or that you're facing may be negative. He said, and the best way to handle it is to turn it into a positive. And that's sort of why I enjoyed pretty much everything I did. I tried to turn the negative into a positive. And most of the time it worked. Today it even works because I'm not in prison. So, but anyhow, that was back during the 60s. Also back during the 60s, and we formed a new housing group to help low-income families. And in conjunction with the Brethren Church, the housing group was known as HOPE. HOPE stood for Home Owner Purchase Effort. What we did was we took an old house that was sitting around for sale. We bought it for a little value. We rehabbed it and then sold it just over cost to somebody who needed a house. This is how the houses on Union Street was actually, we purchased those houses from the college. College owned most of those homes. We purchased those colleges. A lot of them were rehabbed, and most of them were really torn down and new ones built. And I served as president, the first actual president of Hope Incorporated. Bernard became the second. Now, also back to the point when I was also the first African American to join the Westminster JCs. There I became. Now, you got to remember that in all of these things, I used as a tool to help fight integration. Being a member of Hope, being a member of the Westminster JCs, getting to know people around the community, it got people to trust you. Mm-hmm. And when people learn to trust you, then people tend to give in to you a lot easier. So my philosophy was not really demonstrating and out in the middle of the street fighting with the police and getting bit by dogs and people getting locked up. My philosophy was that let me tackle it first, one-on-one, and see what I could do. Not now, but in my younger days, I think I could have sold the Brooklyn Bridge a few times. And it worked. In most cases, it worked. And that's the way it was with Frock in the swimming pool.
Mm-hmm.
But when I became a member of the Westminster Jay-Z's, I became friends with some people, Ray Owens, Don Warner, and some of these people, and they invited me to join. And my first reaction was, no, that's all white. I don't think I want to get mixed up with that. But sitting down over a Coke and talking to these guys, they said, no, we're not like that. You know, we are actually supporting businesses. Most of these are actually businessmen or have support businesses. And we did community work, like working on children's playgrounds, helping with benefits and things like this. And I became vice president. I became actually the first African American to join, but I also became the first African American, so far as I know, if memory serves me correctly, to actually win what they call the Speak Up Jay-Z contest. It was sort of like the Dale Carnegie course, where they wanted you to learn how to do public speaking. And that's when I sort of drew on my experiences from the General Assembly and all that stuff. And we were District 2. And I won the District 2 round. I lost in the state round, second place. And I served in a number of capacities in the organization. Now, after Hope, and we're still working with the concerned citizens, and we integrated Frog Swimming Pool, and I'm referring to my notes to see what I missed here, and in the Soil Conservation Service. Again, I went up the ladder with a number of awards and so forth. I formed a group, and you had talked to me about the March on Washington. Well, as you well know, when shortly after the March on Washington, and shortly after Dr. King's death, just before he was killed, they were planning a poor people's campaign in Washington, D.C. Well, I formed a group a bit before that, a youth group known as the Carroll County Pioneers. And we took a group of these youngsters on the back of an old dump truck from here, Westminster, and we rode to Washington to deliver some food and goods to the Poor People's Campaign. And we helped with setting up the tents and so forth and stuff like that. Of course, the paper at the time criticized us for doing it, and they said that we should be ashamed of ourselves for tearing up the grass, that beautiful grass, by the Washington Monument and so forth. Well, it sort of took me back a ways because I'm thinking, you're comparing grass that can be replanted, reseeded, and it'll grow. You're comparing that, calling that a bad thing, as opposed to feeding people, finding jobs for people, teaching people how to get jobs, and this kind of a thing. But I didn't really battle the point. The young people went, and they enjoyed themselves. And as a matter of fact, Nelson Dorsey was to come, but he got ill, and he was to come and talk about it because they had a grand old time from here to D.C. on the back of a dump truck. We didn't want to go on a modern bus. And if we could have found one, we would have probably gone with a horse and wagon. But we couldn't find a farmer dumb enough to let us have a horse and wagon. So we went on the back of a wee Bowman's dump truck to the March on Washington. And there we had a wonderful time. Again, along with the concerned citizens, I was the first African American to become president of the East Middle School PTA. As I had my daughter and my sons, and all three went to East Middle School, and I became president of the PTA. That led to someone, and I can't remember the name, and I won't look it up, quit the school board, Carroll County School Board. And at the insistence of people, they said, well, John, let's put your name in the hat. Because at that time, it was an appointed board. It was not an elected board. So Governor Mandel was in the office at that time. And they said, well, let us put your name in. And I'm thinking, oh, what? And first, I didn't want to do it. And I thought, hey, he's never going to pick me. So, okay, throw the name in the hat. Well, lo and behold, I got a call one night that he had chosen me to sit on the school board. Well, now, this again becomes a scary situation because up to this point, because of my activities in and about the community, I had been threatened, I had been shot at, and I'm thinking, well, here we go again. You know, what are we going to do about this? Well, some folks in the county decided they would take care of it for me. I spent one night in jail for simple assault. Well, by the time the people got done with it, I had murdered the president. I had raped somebody. It was all kinds of garbage. Well, the governor called me one night about 6 o'clock in the evening, and he said, there's going to be a state trooper coming to your house. Boy, okay. He's going to bring you to my office. Okay. Now, I'm not supposed to refuse the governor, but, well, I got enough problems with this school board thing. So anyway, I said, okay. So we went to Annapolis, to his office. Kind of, when I got there, sort of felt big time, you know. He had kickback in the governor's mansion, you know. And it felt like, oh boy, I kind of know what the first class citizens feel like now, you know. And he kicked back, real down to earth guy, not the stuffed shirt that I thought he was or was going to be. And we talked about it. And he said, obviously, some folks up there, he said, now I'm not going to tell you who they are because I don't want you going out of here killing somebody. So he said, I'm not going to tell you who they are, but he said, I will tell you this much. So a lot of those white folks up there who pretended to be your friend, they're not. And he said, watch your back. He said, now here's what we're going to do. And I thought, uh-oh, here it comes. You can take the position on the school board, he said, if I have to give you 24-hour protection by the state police. Or, he said, if you don't want to take the position, you find me another black person up there, man or woman. I don't care, he said, as long as they're African American, black, or whatever you want to call them, to put on that school board. I said, we're going to rock that town up there on its heels. And so I said, okay, you got yourself a deal. But he said, now if you can find anybody to take it, you're going to take it. You're going to suffer through this thing. But he said, I'm behind you 100%. So I said, okay. On the way back up the road, I'm thinking to myself, who in the world are we going to get? I don't really want to put my kids in danger. I mean, not that I didn't enjoy being shot at, now don't get me wrong. But I don't want to put my family in the middle of a storm. So I'm thinking, who in the world can... Got home that night. I think it's about 11 or 12, 1 o'clock or something like that. I got on the phone and I called George Collins. He said, I don't want to do it. And so he said, call Bernard. Get Bernard to do it. Called Bernard and he said, no, if they got on you for having a little bit of time in the jail over there. He said, I'm afraid I'm in the same boat that you are. He said, come on out here. So I went out to Jones's that night. And here we are at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out who we can get to do this. Simultaneously, we're sitting at his table, sipping coffee. We said, We know who we can get. And I said, yeah, I know who you're going to say. He said, who? And together we said Richard Dixon. Because we knew at that point Richard Dixon was really qualified to do it. Out of all of us, he was more qualified. He had a business degree. He had a degree in financing. He had 20 years in the military. So we agreed if anybody can do this, it's Dixon. We woke him up.
I bet he loved that.
Oh, it didn't go too well, but we told him, and he kind of shuffled and hemmed and hawed, and yeah. But I could understand it, because when you get into a position like this, the first thing in people's minds is the safety. What is this going to do for me? What is it going to do for my family? So we talked and we talked, and we assured him that he would be all right. He agreed to do it. And as the old saying goes, of course, the rest was history. He was the best one over there. He became president of the school board. Smeltzer and a lot of the other people got behind him because he was good at it. He was qualified for it. As a matter of fact, up to this point, he was more qualified to do the job than anybody they've ever had over there or anybody they have now. And so they ran him to the top of the ladder. So then we decided, well, let's send him to Annapolis, which we did. Now, I kind of felt like I was responsible for these people, because once I became a member of the JZs, I pulled Jones in, I pulled Dixon in, and because my cousin George was involved in a lot of things in the Freedom area, and I felt like I was responsible for these people. And a lot of times, at night it did bother me. You know, what if something happens to them? You know, it's going to be my fault. But then I thought, what if something happens to me? Whose fault would that be? Well, it would be mine. But at least nobody pushed me into it. I went into it with my eyes wide open, and because I had a gripe with the situation, which was called discrimination. But anyway, we all stayed on board, and we pushed the envelope, we pushed the envelope, we pushed it, and things really started to turn around. And we got Dixon into Annapolis. He went on to be the treasurer. Up the road there's a building named after him, and I could not be any prouder of him. I couldn't be that proud of myself if I'd done it. But I did learn a long time ago, once again, from those old men who used to sit around and talk in the neighborhood. If you want a job done and you don't know how to do it, at least have the good sense to find somebody who does before it really gets all messed up. And this is the way we worked with Dixon. Dixon had the wherewithal to do the job. Whatever job they put before him, be it on the Board of Education, be it in the legislative department, be it the treasurer of the state of Maryland, he eminently qualified for all of these things. And when they said to me, asked me to take the position in the first place, my first thought really was under my breath, if I don't take it, somebody else will have to take it. It doesn't have to be me. As long as we get an African American on that board, I don't care who it is. And that's when I called Jones that night, and I said, we're going to get somebody on there if we have to give birth to somebody. And I'm willing, it doesn't have to be me. And that's when we come up with Dixon, and I said it's a better choice because he's better qualified for the job. Well, went on through that. The 60s led to a lot of things, going to schools, talking about growing up African American in the county, speaking before Dr. Ira Zepp's classes at what was then Western Maryland College. Being associated with Dr. Ira Zepp was an experience in itself.
Certainly was.
Yes, he was quite the man. And his importance, he could generally just lay it over on you, and you felt equal. He was that kind of a person. I enjoyed going to the college and talking to his classes. There's a couple of articles in the paper about speaking. I spoke to some of the schools about it, and this is basically what I've done over the years. I've sort of just floundered around, and wherever I was needed, that's where I went. And we, of course, come up with, in these later years, with the NAACP.
Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I became president, in '04? I believe it was, yeah. I took over the organization. Prior to that, let's see, Phyllis Hammond had it. Prior to that, Brad Collins had it. And I just seem to have a knack for getting these things when they need to be cleaned up. And it pretty much the same story when I went to work someplace. I usually ended up being a supervisor, and I usually got the supervisor's job when things needed to be cleaned up. And somebody once said, yeah, and it was a white person who said this to me. He said, yeah, John, when we dirty it up, we call on you black folks to clean it up. He said, now if you fail, guess who we gonna blame? You. I said, oh, gee, thanks. Glad you have that much confidence in me. But anyhow, you have to excuse me, Pam. When I get into these things, I tend to it becomes a little bit overwhelming.
I can imagine.
But I took over the NAACP, and when I took it over, the membership had dwindled from 250 to probably 75 or 80. They had no money. My first responsibility was to get some money from somewhere, because the organization, we are obligated to support the national organization. And we have to pay a certain amount of dues to national, and then a certain amount of state dues every year. When I took over the organization, the dues had not been paid, which totaled some $250 or $60, and we didn't have any money in the treasury. Now I'm saying to myself, why did I let these people talk me into taking over this organization? Because once again, somebody's got to clean up this mess. So my first duty was to find some money. Well, not only had I been elected as president, I had Charles Harrison, and I had I'm trying to think, Joe Murray, Dan Schaller. Trying to think of the other people as officers. So what I did, I called these people all together. And I told them, you people are the ones who talked me into taking this office. Now, you people are going to have to help me out. And they agreed, whatever you need. And we need money, and we need it now. And I got to give them all credit. Nobody backed away. They said, whatever you need, we got your back, Jack. And they did. We went into our pockets, and we paid the dues to national and state to keep our charter good. From then on, things seem to have gone uphill. And the organization has done quite well. during my tenure in office, were two things that I wanted to do. Number one was I wanted to form a scholarship to support the African American student. Because for years, even though schools were integrated, the African American student was not getting any scholarship money. Even those who qualified. One was my oldest daughter, who was more than qualified and was not even put in for every scholarship you can mention and got none. She got one scholarship from the former students of Robert Moton for $500, and that was all she got. So my aim was to come up with a scholarship plan that would help the African American student. Also, in conjunction with that, the former students of Robert Moton were doing the same thing. And we did come up with a scholarship fund, and it's called a Continuing Education Fund. And let's see, it was 2004, and this is 14, going on 15, so we're coming up on 9, 10 years or something like that. And the scholarship has done well. Every year since then, we've either given out $2,000 to students or we've given out $1,000. And alongside of that, the former students of Moton have given out $1,000 or $2,000. I think they now give out $1,000 on one scholarship and $2,000 on the other. So we've got that much money going into scholarships for African American students. My second intent, which I hope to accomplish, and I did while I was in office, was to find us an office. Because at that time, we were dragging all the paperwork with whoever became president had to bundle up all this paperwork in their office. You had to take it into your home. If there was a computer service, which we had to have, it had to be in your home. And that turned out to be not such a very good idea. Was not good at all. As a matter of fact, when I became president, I told them, no, you're not going to put that computer in my house. So just forget it. So we had to find, Charles Harrison was my first vice president. We set out to find an office someplace, and we went about Carroll County, big barn and stealing and whatever we had to do to try to find an office. Kevin Dayhoff, bless his heart, he said, I know where there's an office. And we're like, where? And he said, what's the building called? Oh, the community.
The Carroll Nonprofit Center.
Carroll Nonprofit Center. And we look at each other like, who is the Carroll Nonprofit Center? And then that's when he explained, and they were building it. Mm-hmm. But we saw it there. We had no idea what it was for. But it was for nonprofits. And so we investigated. We put in the application. We went to national. And lo and behold, we finally got us an office. So at the end of my term, I think we had up to about 125 or 30 members. We had a continuing education fund, and we had a new office, which we did not move into until Charles's term came up. But we had us an office. And they said to me, we want you to run again. I said, no, you don't. Now it's time for it's time now for somebody else to take over. And that's where we stand today. My wife now is president, and she's been president now for this will be, as of tonight when she takes over, this will be her, fourth term? Which, puts her into the 8th or 9th year. Mm-hmm. And I must admit that she's done an excellent job of keeping things alive. As the old saying goes, we ourselves are not big, but we managed to do a lot of big things. So what is it? It's not the size of the fight in the dog. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. And that's kind of the way we operate. We're not very big. As the old saying goes, we're not big at all, but we're not really that small.
John, as you look back, I mean, you've seen a lot of change since you were born in Sykesville. How do you see things moving forward from here?
Well, locally we have our problems. Discrimination still exists, like it does all over the USA. It's not as blatant. It's what do you say? Underlined. What was it? Covert? Is that the word?
Yes.
And you sort of have to dig to find it. I'm finding that since President Obama took office, it's become more open. People have gotten brazen to the point where they want to express the fact that they don't like the man and they don't like anybody associated with him. Even to the point where I've personally been treated to Duke City, a fight that is, because he was elected to office. I was told, well, you supported him. Of course I supported him. I've also been questioned about the fact, did you support him simply because he was black? And my answer to that was like Steve Harvey's. Isn't that why you didn't support him? Or what's the difference? But I see things, don't get me wrong, things have made a tremendous change. They have changed to about 160 degrees. We're not at 180 yet, and we're nowhere near 360, but we're at a good 160 to 65 degrees. We, as a people, and I'm talking about African Americans, have to continue to realize that segregation is not dead. Don't listen to the politician who stands on TV and tells you, well, you got a black president now, so we don't need this law or that law. There is no more discrimination. That politician is talking for himself, not you. Sadly to say, a number of our people, African Americans that is, believe that the situation overdone, that there is no more discrimination. I've had African Americans to say to me, you all talk too much about what's wrong with the black man. Well, what's your take on the situation? Well, maybe if you stopped talking about it, it wouldn't be that bad. Well, I don't, who are you talking about? At the NAACP, that's all y'all do is talk about. But wait a minute. The NAACP's not out here in a police car shooting down young black men. The NAACP didn't take and drag somebody white down the road behind the pickup till the skin fell off the bones. I don't recall the NAACP putting a bomb in somebody's church and blowing it up. So where do you come off with this stuff? And trust me, and I tell people all the time, especially African Americans, it can happen again. Don't be fooled by the fact that since you can go to school now and sit in the seat next to little white Johnny and little Susie, since some of us can move into a neighborhood that is mixed, and that's all well and good, and sitting in the seat beside one, that's good. These are signs of a change, and nobody's knocking that. But we are knocking the fact that people are still being targeted, profiled. They're still talking about disallowing us the proper channels to vote. Every time we turn around, there's a new program about that's going to disenfranchise us as a people. So you have the audacity to stand there and say to me that we should not be talking about it? The point is, we have to talk about it. The point is, it's been swept under the rug too long. The point is that we do have a black president of this country, and people seem to want to constantly barrage you or make you feel bad when you do talk about it, because they don't want you to talk about it, because they want, yet they go behind closed doors and in closed sessions talk about how they're going to deny you your equal rights. All you have to do, and I tell people repeatedly, is listen to the radio, read the paper. Don't listen to what somebody else tells you, because what people tell you, they're going to tell you their side of the story. We had in this last election about the rights for gay people. I had a man come up to me in the middle of a convenience store and tell me point blank, you people are responsible for the laws favoring gay people. What do you mean, you people? You know, everybody went to the poll and voted. So it came out in favor of people who were gay. Well, if this is what the nation wants, don't look at me. I'm one individual. And don't look at us and go, you people. People of all races, colors, and creed voted. So how are you going to blame that on black people? Homosexuals come in all colors, and they have as much right as anybody else to whatever it is they choose to do. You know, worldwide, things are just in a pure chaos. Wars abound. We as Americans, we talk about the fact that we want other nations to be more humanized toward their fellow man, yet at the same time, basically, we discriminate. We want other countries to give people their full rights. We discriminate. We try to tell other people in other countries how they should do this or that or the other economically. Yet we repeatedly support and give to the rich, and we deny the middle class and the poor. Oh, somebody's going to disagree with what I say, but it really doesn't make any difference to me. It's not what I'm saying, it's what is. Overall, yeah, there's been a big change. Overall, we have a long, long way to go. I said it's at 165, not 360. That's an indicator that says we have to continue to follow the curve.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm an old truck driver. And I think I'm probably the first African American in the history of the county. In 1999, I drove for a company out of Massachusetts known as AMI, American Motor Corporation. We were leased to a company in Baltimore, and I drove for them for about 5 years. Their trucks came from what was known as TRALA. TRALA stands for, let me see if I can still remember, Truck Leasing and Rental Association, something to that effect. Each year, they went over drivers' records from the time they started way down here driving a truck up until the present time. And in 1999, I was, by my peers and by all the powers to be in the association and by all the powers to be at AMI, I was chosen National Driver of the Year. When they called and told me, and I said, I think you're talking to the wrong person, and the lady called. And she said, no, you are John Lewis. And I said, well, I'm one of them. And she said, you do work for Dietrich Industries under an AMI contract. Yeah, I'm one of them. And she said, you do live at 1124 Western Chapel Road in New Windsor? Yeah, I'm one of them. And she said, "You're the one we want." And I said, "Oh, I am?" I said, "Well, why would you choose me? You know, you got many drivers nationwide." And she said, "Yeah, but not too many drivers," she said, "fit the criteria. One of the criteria is you have to log 3,000 to 4,000 to 5,000 hours of driving with no chargeable accidents. The other one is you have to log excess of 2 million miles. Nearest calculation was I had logged 2,500,000, and that was accident free. Then they take into account the number of days you have missed from work, which in 5 years I think I had missed 2. And they then go examine your family life. What do you do in the community? What do you do for your family? My granddaughters and my children had written letters, and nobody told me. You don't get too many things over on me, but they got that one over on me. They had written letters to AMI, and some of which I have in my notes here, and telling what a father I was, what a grandfather I was. And when I did get to read them, I thought, well, they talking about somebody else. They're not talking about me. But anyway, they couple all this together. And they said, well, nobody in our association came close. And I thought, well, thank you very much. So they called my wife and they asked her what was one of my favorite spots in the world to visit. And don't laugh now. Promise me you won't laugh.
I'll try.
Okay. You know, there's a little bit of child that stays in all of us. And it's good to keep a little bit of that child in you. Okay? Don't ever grow so old that you lose a bit of your childishness.
That's right. I don't have a chance of that.
Anyway, she told him his favorite place to visit is Disney World. So they sent me to Disney World. Yeah, they did. And I quite enjoyed it. You had a whole bunch of trophies and stuff like that. And but of all, I enjoyed the trip to Disney World. And as I was going over all of this stuff, trying to think of what I had done and didn't do and all this, and Jean said, don't forget, you were 1999's Driver of the Year. And she said, I don't think that award has gone to anybody else in Carroll County. She said, at least no African Americans. So I'll end on that note. And no, don't ask me if I can think of anything else.
I won't.
Because I probably will.
I know you will. I've seen you preach without a license before. Thank you. Thank you for your time and for everything you've done. And for everything you're going to do, because you're not off the hook yet.
Pam, I got to tell you, I'm not getting any younger.
I know, but you got fired up just a year ago.
Oh.
So you got to keep going.
So in other words, you're telling me now I got a tank full of fuel.
That's right.
I got to burn that tank full of fuel off.
You got that. The first tank lasted you 50 years. So this tank's got to go. You got a long way to go, John.
Okay. Touche. Okay. Touche. Well, look, it was my pleasure. And this whole thing with the African American Trailblazers was sort of my brainchild. And I'm hoping to anyone that might see this or is listening, that if you are in the Carroll County African American community and you have an idea of any person who might make a good Carroll County African American pioneer, please let us know simply by calling me at the NAACP office. My number's in the phone book, and I always said, when you come into Carroll County, if you don't know where I live, or you don't know where I am, you ask 3 people. Now, if the first 2 don't know, it's a guarantee the third one will.
That's right.
So you follow that rule, and you'll find me or my wife or any member of the NAACP. and get on board with the story. This is all done to put African American history in the forefront of the books as well as other histories. I do not believe that we should have 1 month out of the year to celebrate African American history. I don't believe that we should have certain day out of the year to celebrate Dr. King or anyone else who contributed to the movement. I think history, be it white, black, Indians, or whatever, history is 24/7. Thanks.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. Would you please tell us your name and how long you've been living in Carroll County?
Well, I'm Dr. Darcel Harris. I've been living here exactly 24 years because I came here in August of 1990.
Wonderful. Dr. Harris, inform us about Grow Mission. Why is it here? Who does it serve? And what is it? What is the organization about?
Well, Grow Mission started out as somebody's dream
Okay.
back in 1997, but it didn't come to fruition until 2002 when two families, the Harrises and the Wilsons, got together with the help of God, of course, and decided to open up the garage, and Rebecca Ornstein helped us by letting us use the garage, and we made sandwiches and gave it to the homeless. So that's how it started.
Now, who does it serve? Just the homeless folks, or?
It serves anybody that needs anything. A matter of fact, we cover areas from GED education to tutoring to referrals, helping with HSP. We're connected with all the other outreach agencies. We work along with them. So anybody that needs help can come, we can help.
Okay.
Especially those that have been rejected by the agencies like HSP because they don't meet the criteria or they make too much money. They can come to us and we help them.
Let me ask you this. Do you ever go on Pennsylvania Avenue up by the bridge where all the homeless people were staying and give out food to them?
We work in conjunction with HSP with that.
Okay.
What we do is every third Saturday, we set up a barbecue grill and we give out food. Not only cooked food, we give out fresh produce from one of the farms. We give out clothes, prayer, blood pressure checks, and we definitely try to get them hooked into the other agencies in the community. One thing that has happened this year in October of 2013, we acquired a building at 12 Carroll Street. And we have a little boutique there. We have an educational service there. We're going to do Zumba in October. And our focal point are the people that can walk.
Okay.
Because they don't have, sometimes they can't do a lot of things they would want to do because they can't get there because of transportation.
So what is your role in the Grow Mission organization?
I'm the coordinator.
Okay. And what does that mean?
That means you got to put up with a lot of stuff. And you have to be the bridge between the commercial people, the other nonprofit agencies, the schools. Everything comes together in me. And I send out the workers under Grow, and I send them out and put them in the places that they need to be to do the work that needs to be done.
Okay.
You want an example? For
Please.
example, the block party that's coming up now. One person is out there now getting all the freebies. Me, I'm the one that fill out the paperwork for the permits. Then we have the other people bringing in information or going out to the other agencies to bring in the information or able to get the people to come and set up tables. Other people are selecting the music. Gotta have good music for a good block party. And other people are buying food. So I tell everybody what to do.
Oh, okay. So tell us some more about the Black Party. How long has that been going on? And were you the first to start the Black Parties around Westminster?
Well, originally the first one we had was Rebecca Ornstein and Action 02 002 or something like that, 02, because we were trying to clean up Pennsylvania Avenue. So she came up with the idea. But the thing, after we did it that one year, no one else wanted to do it.
Okay.
So then we picked it up. Grow Mission picked it up when Tri-Street put it down.
Okay. Tri-Street, what's that about?
Tri-Street was the union of Union Street, Pennsylvania Avenue, and Main Street in an effort to keep drugs off the streets, or to make our community safe by keeping the drugs off the street, making sure the homeless was taken care of, making sure we had proper lighting and all kinds of things. And we worked in conjunction with the mayor and the chief of police and the city planners and stuff like that.
So when is the block party?
Well, we have one, and we changed it to Resource Fair.
Okay, Resource Fair.
And we did that because our main goal was to get the resources to the invisible population. And that includes veterans.
Oh, yeah.
And so it'll be the first one will be August 17th from 12 to 8. And that will be located at the Tot Lot off of Charles Street in South Court Street. Then there'll be one in September, September 21st. And we're going to use, instead of using the park, we're going to use the parking lot that's next to or close to Harry's, Colonel Rouser's parking lot.
Okay.
Because a lot of times, a lot of the people that are under the bridges won't come up to the park.
Okay.
But they'll come to that parking lot.
Okay.
So we want to make them feel comfortable too.
Now let me ask you this, since this is about Trailblazers in Carroll County, is your family the first African Americans to be a part of Grow Mission? And when did you guys start, participating in Grow Mission?
Well, Grow Mission started in 2002, and yes.
So
yes.
you started in its inception?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
And you were the first African American family?
Yeah, my daughter and I.
Great, great. Anything else you want us to tell us about Grow Mission?
Or
the Resource Day?
Okay, well, Grow Mission itself is a nonprofit, and we actually run by faith because I don't know how we were able to sustain the things that we do for so long, because we give away free tutoring, we give away free food, free clothing, free whatever. If people can't pay their bills, we make sure that they pay their bill. Now we have 2 cars, but they're not really real like luxurious cars, but we got 2 cars that we can rent out to people to use so that they can get back and forth to work.
That's
and stuff like that. So it's growing, exactly what it says it's going to do. The resource fairs, I'm on the executive board for the homeless committee, so I'm very aware of not only the homeless under the bridge, but the ones in the schools. There's homeless in the schools. And one of the things that we actually do during that resource fair is make sure that the kids get school supplies.
Great.
If they don't have a haircut, we make sure they get haircut money or whatever they need, so when they go to school, they won't be different than anyone else.
Where can they send donations? If people want to send donations.
Grow Mission, P.O. Box 1626, Westminster, Maryland 21158.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Harris,
You're quite welcome.
for a very informative interview.
Thank you. Thanks for asking.
Good afternoon. Could you tell me your name and how long you have lived in Carroll County?
My name is Jean Lewis, and I've lived in Carroll County approximately 45 or more years.
Okay, Jean, you are the longest serving NAACP president for Branch 7014. Why do you continue to do this work for the NAACP?
Well, in 2001, I took an early retirement, and I really felt lost. I wasn't prepared to go mentally. Sometimes I still miss doing that work. And one of my neighbors got me involved in human services program, and then gradually I got involved in more community activities. And It really is rewarding. It's rewarding to see the things that have taken place, because this is my 8th year that I've served as president.
Wonderful.
And it's rewarding to see the progress we've made, the relationships that we've built. It's wonderful to see. We are located at 255 Clifton Boulevard, Suite 310, and we're in the Carroll Nonprofit Building. There are about approximately 25 nonprofits there. And the relationship in that building is absolutely fantastic. You can walk down the hall to talk with someone. If you don't know what you need, there's always a nonprofit there that can really help you. And I enjoy it so much. It's such an essential part for me. And I think the NAACP, which stands for National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And I think that really it's needed in the county. It's not an obsolete organization any longer, but there's so much work that has been done, the tangible work, and there's so much more that we can do.
Tell us about the work or the accomplishments that the branch 7014 has made in Carroll County.
Well, one of them is we have a fantastic relationship with Carroll County Public Schools. I can't brag about it enough. When Dr. Eckert left, I thought, oh no, how are we going to make out with a new superintendent? But Steve Guthrie has been wonderful. We have his ear, he has our ear. We can come to him with any concern that's going on in the school, and we can be assured that there's going to be something taken care of. This makes the 8th year that we have traveled with the recruitment team to recruit minority teachers for Carroll County Public Schools, and the numbers have been going up. They're not as high as I would like to see, but they are working their way up. This year there were 10 minority teachers that were hired, and as a matter of fact, on this past Monday, I had the opportunity to have lunch with the minority teachers that were hired, and we go, and there's no expense to the organization, and it's no expense to the school. It's a grant-funded activity that we're able to take a part in, and it's just a wonderful relationship that we have. We have a wonderful relationship with Random House. If we call on them in a need, we can get that. And we have a wonderful relationship with the Chief of Police in Westminster. So if there's an incident that happens, he calls me, Jean, this is what's taken place. If someone comes to you with a complaint, this is the fact from the police department. So, you know, those kind of things mean a lot. And Commissioner Doug Howard has come and spoken to our organization, and I think he's been there twice. Mm-hmm. And it's good because the people get to talk with him, ask questions, and he tells us what's going, you know, you get a good feel for what's going on. And also, Superintendent Steve Guthrie had come and I said, you've got 20 minutes, and he talked for like, I mean, the back and forth conversation lasted like almost an hour and a half. So those are some of the things that I think we should be proud of.
Mm-hmm. Great. So with these accomplishments, I hear the passion in your voice. Why? Why is that a passion?
Well, with the school system, it's a passion because we're a blended family of 6 adult children who have 11 grandchildren, and we have 3 great-grandchildren. And the education that these children have received in Carroll County School has been fantastic. We had one granddaughter that went to school in Georgia, and the first semester she transferred back because she said what she was getting there was what she had already taken here in Carroll County Public Schools. So those kind of things, and we can see that in our other grandchildren that are local. Not all of the 11 are local, but what I see in those children and other children, I want everybody's child to become the best that they can be. Mm-hmm. And we want to live in a community that's the best that it can be. We want to worship in a community that's the best that it can be. We want to be employed in key positions. And those kind of the things that really gives me a passion drive for. We want, so often on television, all we see are negative reports from the African American community. And we don't want to be that. We want to raise people up to a higher level. So when I see someone get an internship at a large firm, my heart just sings. I get excited. I try to encourage everyone. And that's one of the reasons why one of the accomplishments that we do, we give a $1,000 scholarship. It's called the Continuing Education Award to an African American student. Some years we've given more than that. It depends on what our finances are. We've gotten support from Random House for that. The Westminster Kiwanis Club had helped us also with that. But we want to push the students to achieve, to be, like I said before, to be what they can be. As a, what is it, the Marines, be all you can be. That's what we want. We want them to be all that they can be. And that's why it's so important. And I want that to happen, and I want us to be a productive part of our Carroll County community.
Now, you talked about scholarships. Do you accept donations?
Yes, we accept donations, and then it's a tax-free donation that we would give for students.
Now, let me ask you this. Where can they send their donations?
The donation can be earmark your check for scholarship, and you can send it to Carroll County NAACP, 255 Clifton Boulevard, Suite 310, Westminster, Maryland, 21157.
Before we end, I want to talk about what you have in your hand. Can you explain what you have in your hand?
Yes, what I have in my hand is one of the projects that we've done here at the Community Media Center.
Okay.
Back in 2007, I spoke with, well, the director of the Media Center, Marianne Wears, called me in, and she said, how would you like to work on an oral history project? Because a couple of years before that, we had talked about recording oral histories, and it kind of slipped, but she had a few funds, so we were going to get started on that. So with that, I visited African American churches and advertised we were going to have here a symposium on a Saturday morning that we would get going with doing this oral history project. And so to date, we have collected 50 African American oral histories. We also have done an oral history of the White Rock Church in Sykesville, I guess that is, Maryland. We've also done a Buffalo Soldier. In case you're not familiar with what a Buffalo Soldier were, I guess after the Civil War or around in that time frame, Buffalo Soldiers, they were African American soldiers. That was before desegregation of the troops. And they went out west, and the Indians saw them, and because of the texture of their hair, they said their hair looked like buffaloes. So that's what they were called. And in the Sykesville area, we have someone, Mr. Bill Decatur, who was a Buffalo Soldier. Of course, he wasn't Civil War time, but that troop was still going on. And there's a wonderful interview with Mr. Decatur about that. Also, we've done we did a history of the March on Washington. And it was the 48th anniversary of the March on Washington. And there's 6 people that took part in that March on Washington with Dr. King. And if you've not seen it, it is really worth going to the website and taking a look at it. And now we're working on this project called African American Trailblazers of Carroll County. So we can get a concept of what people did, what their contributions were, and how they broke through that glass ceiling that you so often hear about. And in the future, we're going to be working on African American churches to get all of the rest of their histories. This is the flyer that is part of that oral history. All told, we had, in 2011, we had 500 of the oral histories, with the 50 being part of the African American history. But back in May of 2011, this project was recognized by the Maryland Preservation Award for Education of Excellence, the Oral History Project. And we were invited to Annapolis, and we had a reception. And it was really amazing because most of the other people it were people from all over the county. Sykesville got an award. I don't remember what it was for, but Sykesville was awarded at that time. But we were the only ones who were about oral histories. There were bridges and restoration of buildings that were part of that. But we had at the reception, we were the king and queens, because everybody wanted to know how we got started on this project. But it was something that was a passion for me, because so many people are passing, and there's such a wealth of information. And the Bible tells us, if we do not know our history, we will repeat it. So we need to know our history. Our children need to know our history, because they don't understand the importance of wearing sagging pants. What it symbolizes, that's what the prisoners wear, because they take your belt, they take your shoelaces, they give you big shirts, and they don't understand what that meant and how that grieves my heart and others' hearts to see that. And the loss of farmland in the county and other things that took place, in the desegregation in the schools, and how people were treated, and how now some of those folk have come back and said, I'm sorry for the way I treated you when I was in school. So this oral history, along with the Board of Education, are just two things that are really, really passionate for me, and we want to continue it. Here at the Media Center, there's lessons to learn how to use the cameras. There are lessons on techniques of giving interviews. And I think that they would more than welcome someone to come in here and learn those things, so that we can continue this project. And we now have an oral history person here that's taking care of that project.
Great, great. Well, again, we thank you for the wonderful information and a fantastic interview.
Thank you very much.